So I was messing around with porting my game Walk to the Spot from Pico-8 to DragonRuby. Pico-8 is kind of a fake, what do you call it? A fantasy console that never really existed. But it's really fun to make games in. DragonRuby is this really cool game engine that I was planning on potentially porting Walk to the Spot to so that I could put it on like the Switch or the iPhone or stuff like that. Maybe Steam even. And so I thought, hey, these are both cool little game engines that I've played with. So maybe I can port my game from one to the other. That was my thought. So just a quick refresher on what Walk to the Spot really is. It's a sort of old school game where you're trying to walk to the spot. It's pretty fun, very simplistic. Think like Atari, original Nintendo, that kind of thing. And so I thought, okay, I will ask ChatGPT a bunch of questions. Here, I'll scroll up to the top. Bunch of questions about, really just porting to DragonRuby. What are the differences between Pico-8 and DragonRuby? That kind of thing. Because there are a lot of subtle differences, which we'll definitely go into in this video. So I start looking at it, and I figured this is faster than Googling, right? So I was, talking to ChatGPT, and I was like, hey, do you know how to port code from Pico-8 to DragonRuby? I figure it's worth a shot. And it said, yeah, I can totally port code from Pico-8 to DragonRuby. And then it started telling me the differences because Pico-8's Lua, DragonRuby's Ruby. Both are pretty reasonable languages, but certainly different, right? And you can see some of the kind of equivalent code here. Not too crazy, but different. And I had kind of started writing some of this code myself just to kind of like get some of the different bits over and so on. And then I was like, wait a second, maybe ChatGPT could just port my code for me. I already wrote the code, but maybe it knows the difference between Lua and Ruby. So I copied the code here from inside the actual Pico-8 cartridge, because you can just pull the Lua code out of it. So just copied that in, took it over to ChatGPT, and lo and behold, after copying my code in, it gave me this DragonRuby equivalent code. Now, I'm just going to go ahead and copy it to show you what this did, because it certainly wasn't perfect on the first go around. So we get something like this, and it's kind of a thing, but a lot of the bits, especially the vertical scrolling, are totally off. The whole thing is just kind of like the wrong coordinate system a little bit, right? So, okay, that's the DragonRuby code from the sort of original port. Not perfect, but you could see that some of the structure is there, and it got a lot of the code kind of moved over. It's just that there's like details between the engines. So again, it changed some state handling, updated draw logic, changed languages. Pretty good for just asking ChatGPT to help me out. So then I said, okay, they use different coordinate systems. Can you fix the code to account for that? So it's like, oh yeah, these are some differences in the coordinate system scaling. So it starts adding a scale factor. Let's see what that does. By the way, DragonRuby's cool because you can just reload super fast. As you can tell, and by the way, you can't see it really easily, but when I hit up, it goes on the keyboard, it goes down. When I hit down, it goes up. That's partially due to the coordinate systems being very different. So just for reference, Pico-8's coordinate system 0, 0 starts at the top left and works its way out that way. DragonRuby starts at the bottom left and works its way out that way. So as you can see, the Y values are going to be kind of jacked up, as well as the massive differences in coordinate system. Pico-8 is 128 by 128. DragonRuby is 1280 by 720. So totally different universes as far as that goes. Wouldn't expect it to get it right on the first try, but like, okay, so it's trying to get it right with some code scaling, but it's definitely not great. So I tried to explain that, just like I was explaining it to you. Can you fix the code to account for it? So it tried to do that. Let's see what that did. So if we reload, okay, so this is looking a little closer. again, if you go back to kind of the PICO-8 thing, it should look more like that. And obviously the sprites aren't there, right? But I'm thinking like this is player sprite, this is explosions, or this is the spot that you're walking to. So, you know, they should be more like the middle, right? So it's kind of off base that way. But it does have the logic working pretty decently where if I walk to the spot, it gives me a score. I get credit for that. You've got explosions happening, which look dangerous. Again, you can kind of see how I was doing explosions in the first place. They're basically scaling up and so on and so forth in PICO-8. So anyway, if we just run that again, yeah, you can see how but again, like it's running at a totally different speed. So it's not perfect, but ChatGPT is kind of getting us there. Certainly faster than if I was just typing this all out by hand, right? So, okay, I mess with it a little bit more and I say, can you adjust the starting positions to fit the coordinate system? Let's see what that does. And then reload. That didn't really do much. I'll be honest. I think the code's different. I'm not going to sit here and try and diff it, but it says it did some things. It's got this invert Y function, which this I don't think is actually correct. So there's a lot of things it's trying to do with like a scale factor and so on to kind of convert my original PICO-8 code to work with this. And then I was like, okay, let's adjust the collision boundaries to fit the widescreen format. It gave me some more code. It's added bits more, like the width and height is now kind of accounting for. And so maybe that will help. Spoiler alert, doesn't help as much as you'd think. It's looking a lot similar, but hey, look, we're collisioning with the sides of the screen a little bit better. The top, not so much. The bottom, kind of. So better-ish, but not great. So at this point, I actually was getting a little bit frustrated. Because this is kind of the point where I go like, is ChatGPT really worth it? Maybe it got me a little ways down the road and I just need to kind of, you know, do the rest by hand, which is fine. But I was like, okay, flip the up and down controls. This part didn't actually work, I don't think, at least not the way that I thought it should. So let's run that. Yeah, it didn't actually flip the up and down controls. That was disappointing. Sorry, ChatGPT, you failed that one. Or did I? I thought I copied that code. You know what? Maybe I didn't copy the code correctly. Nope. Did not fix. Did not fix. Okay. So whatever ChatGPT did there, it was wrong. I'm sure later it'll listen to this and think that I was a terrible person for saying mean things about ChatGPT. But anyway, so I was like, okay. Also, the origin coordinate point is different on sprites. Can you fix that? Because it is. PICO-8, I believe the origin point is top left, and I want to say that DragonRuby's origin point is like the center of a sprite, maybe something like that. So, okay, we've got some code that's supposed to handle sprite origin alignment. Let's reload DragonRuby with that. Well, it moved stuff. That actually collisions a little bit better. Not great, but like actually pretty okay on some of the axes, right? So it's like, okay, you know, I mean, again, we're still colliding with the spot decently well, so maybe that's pretty good. And then I was thinking like, you know, it's adding a lot of these scale factors. It's doing a bunch of stuff for me. Maybe that's not the best. And so I said, okay, remove the scale factor and rewrite the code as if it were originally written for DragonRuby. So instead of like porting it, it's kind of taking the code and trying to, you know, more or less simulate it as if it were natively written in DragonRuby using the sort of DragonRuby defaults. Did that work? Oh, well, look at that. It's not perfect, but it's better. The sprites are moving at a different speed. And again, in my original code, it's like 1 pixel at a time. So it's still probably moving at like 1 pixel, but hey, look, boundary collisions are pretty good. Explosions still work. Got the bottom side boundaries. So all of a sudden, by asking it to rewrite it sort of natively for DragonRuby, as opposed to porting it with scale factors, that seemed to help a lot. So ChatGPT seemed to like that better. And then I was like, okay, there's still some other little bits that I don't totally love. For example, so yeah, it did a pretty good job. And then adjust the score and scaling, score and high score labels to fit better on the screen. So copy that in. And all of a sudden, we've got a pretty decent, not perfect, but pretty decent, like this. Labels look a lot better. This probably should be more there, but I mean, honestly, I could be okay with this. It's not, you know, pixel perfect for what was there originally, but again, left in an interesting position where, and I think I stopped there. Yeah. So improve label positioning. Yeah. So left in this interesting position where at the end of the day, I have a pretty decent DragonRuby feeling port of Walk to the Spot where not everything's working perfectly, but it certainly feels pretty close to what I started with. Now, obviously it's looking for the frames and the frames are not there. So I have to go into PICO-8 and export the graphics, and I need to export the sound. And there are definitely facilities for that. So I can go into here and I can run exports on that. I can run exports on this. That's the time app. I can run exports on the sound, waves and all of that. But the final sort of code here, it's pretty reasonable. It's not maybe perfect, but you go like, hey, that's not bad. And at the end of the day, I think I can, you know, export my sprites, pull in the font, do a couple other things, and have, you know, DragonRuby spitting out a version of Walk to the Spot that is close to what I had originally on PICO-8 just by talking to ChatGPT. Now, with a little bit of work from me, I can add polish and make it my own and make it a working game, hopefully on, you know, the Switch and the iPhone and Steam and all of that. So again, not the craziest sort of port ever. Like I'm not saying like, hey, port Doom or something like that, but for, you know, saving me potentially a lot of time on just the boilerplate differences between these two engines, ChatGPT ultimately got there a lot faster than I probably would have just by doing it all by hand, and also probably faster than if I had like some junior dev working for me. So again, not perfect, but with a little poking at it, it's pretty reasonable. I don't think this replaces programmers by any means. I tend to see this more as like a transpiler in the same way that like there are projects that will try and convert your Ruby code to Python or Python to JavaScript or things like that. And so I think in a lot of ways, this is something like that, but it doesn't obviously give you a fully finalized, polished thing. It's just a very useful tool that's like, you know, a step in kind of the porting process or the kind of like asset pipeline in a way where you go like, yeah, it does a little bit of the work for you and saves you some time so that you can go down to the other details and make it a little bit nicer, a little bit faster. So for that, that's a pretty impressive addition to the toolbox. So thanks, ChatGPT. And by the way, if you haven't checked out PICO-8 or DragonRuby, both of them are great game engines and you should give them a try. So that's all I got for today. Thanks for watching.